You're listening to Strange by Nature, your guide to the strange, weird, unbelievable, and improbable wonders of the natural world.
Hello everyone, thanks for being here today. I am Kirk Mona and I am joined today by Rachel Ginza and Victoria Thompson. We are all professional naturalists who together have scoured the world for weird and wonderful wonders just to please your mammalian brain's desire for novelty. Isn't that nice? Let's do this.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another show. Oh, it's so good. It's so good to see everyone again.
Yay!
I'm excited for this week to hear what sort of weird, strange things you brought for me, but also for all of our great listeners.
I'm so excited.
I have a question. I have a question for you. Have either of you ever seen these lists online where they list out all the sort of traditional words for groups of animals?
Oh, sure. Venery.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, for example, like a parliament of owls and a murder of crows.
Absolutely.
A crash of
business
rhinoceroses.
of ferrets.
A shrewdness of apes.
A pandemonium
I was
of
curious
pandas.
about these lists. Yeah,
a flamboyance of flamingos.
They've always there. So you know
Rachel
these well.
knows a few.
Oh yeah,
she does. I was curious about. Although I think technically the pandemonium is not about pandas.
Oh,
it's a pandemonium of something else.
That's
which
fair.
threw me off because you think it'd be about pandas, but very odd. I was curious about these lists as they've always kind of bugged me. Like, where do these lists come from? Where do these names come from?
Mm-hmm.
Right. There's almost never a source listed when these are posted on social media. It's sort of a did you know kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And
like, who calls a group of flamingos a flamboyance?
Right. No one. Right. And I think these lists sort of imply that these are just the accepted correct names for these groups, and people just don't know. Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they've been called this for centuries. Is the implication.
Right. Although in some cases, like literally no one has ever called that them ever.
Right.
So what I take issue with is that these are even legit, or were they just invented solely as a joke or a meme to pass around? I mean, no one ever really says like I saw an embarrassment of pandas at the zoo. That's the one for giant pandas is an embarrassment. So people would be utterly confused if you're like, oh, I saw this embarrassment of pandas. They're like, oh my God, what happened to them? Right?
What did you
like,
do
no
to
one
the
talks like that.
pandas?
So
also, pandas are solitary animals.
Right? That's why it's an embarrassment if they're all together.
There you go. It's an embarrassment when they keep falling out of trees and stuff. So I did a little digging, and it turns out some of these are indeed very old, going back mostly to French and English hunting manuals from the 1400s, while some of them appear on websites more recently with absolutely no attribution whatsoever and may just be jokes or even typos. For example, the Book of St. Albans in 1486 lists a group of ferrets as a busyness, while multiple modern websites, including the San Diego Zoo, claim they're called a business,
right? As
in she runs a business correcting typos. So I think they just misspelled busyness, and we're like, that can't be right. It must be busines, and it's that's not what it is. It's busyness, not business.
Ferrets
but
are
like
pretty busy.
that's how these things happen. I think that one's just a typo that's been passed around. So anyhow, the lists are fun, but take them with a grain of salt. There's one particular word on those lists that I want to focus in on, though, and that's the collective noun herd.
Oh, yeah. That gets used all of the time.
It gets used a lot, and we can trace it back.
I feel like any sort of ruminant group of hoofed animals is a herd.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. Well, the deal is this word goes back a really long ways. I mean, it goes past, it's probably older than Old English, actually. It probably goes into like a Proto-Germanic. This word is very old, we know, and it literally just means a group of animals. And
amazing.
They're usually, you're kind of hinting at this, but usually domestic animals and almost always animals with hooves. So, which, ruminants would fall into that. Mm-hmm. So here's the thing, though. Herds don't have to be domesticated animals, though. There can be herds of deer or antelope. Sure. Really, any animal that sticks together. And we really love collective nouns.
Well, flock.
Yeah, exactly. See, we really love collective nouns in English. I was just going to get to that. We don't use like the full list from the past, but many of the collective nouns other than herd have stuck around. So I did a little list here. I think we all know flock, school, shoal, pack, pod, colony, band, congregation, army, colony, swarm, cluster, troop, tribe, drove, cast, band, caravan, coalition, bunch, litter, team, brace, skein, convocation, parade, cast, covey, kettle, horde, clan, party, pride, passel, bevy. Even a weird one that birders used a lot, a murmuration of starlings. We still use a lot of these.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily.
You might not have known everyone I said.
Yeah.
And you might not necessarily, you're getting at, Victoria, we don't necessarily use them for animals.
Right.
Is that what you're going to say?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, so like some of these are used just for groups of humans too, how we break into like
Like a
coalitions
congregation.
and caravans
Congregation, yeah.
and congregations and convocation and parade. So I think some of these may have started out as animal terms that we've now, we still have in our language. We don't necessarily use them for animals anymore. So we do just love collective nouns and use them all the time. But in ecology, scientists have really taken a shine to the word herd. A lot of the collective nouns have been thrown out just for the sake of simplicity. And when ecologists talk about herds of animals, it isn't just domesticated animals and it isn't just hooved animals.
It's a group.
A herd can be an assemblage of, assemblage, there's another collective noun, but it can be an assemblage of any kind of animal, of any kind, as long as they are in communication with each other and stick together. That's sort of the general idea of a herd in ecology.
Whether it's birds or fish or mammals.
Yeah, you could call them all a herd. Yeah.
Okay.
I will say I don't like the idea of a group of fish being called a herd.
It's weird, huh?
It feels off.
Doesn't sit right.
And I guess, some of things like a shoal or a school,
Or a
that
pod.
term is so strong in fisheries that I think people would probably just might default to that one. But
Yeah.
herd can kind of be, from what I understand, can be used for kind of whatever. And with that in mind, I want to tell you about a new group of animals that have been shown to exhibit herding behavior that we didn't know about before.
Oh, okay.
Ooh.
You tell.
Yeah. So it is something that we had never seen or known about previously until this, not super new, but relatively new research was done. And that could be because it's hard to see these animals. These animals live entirely underground. And we don't give them a lot of credit. I'm talking about earthworms.
Well, that's funny, Kirk, because when you were saying that ecologists use the term herd for any kind of animal, I was thinking, like worms? Do they really stick together? I don't know. Well,
wow, that's cool. That's amazing that came into your brain.
You just had
Lead researcher Laura Zerbies from Belgium had an interesting observation. And as I said as we said on the show before, and certainly I've said this while teaching, science begins with observation. That's not just a thing we say. That is the truth. She and her colleagues were trying to study how earthworms interact with soil microbes, but they noticed that whenever they would dig around in the soil they were studying, they often found the worms near each other. And it sort of sparked this idea for another research project.
Sorry, but how many times are you in the woods with kids digging up in the soil? Kids find a worm, and then all of a sudden a bunch of them are finding worms.
If you find one, you find a lot.
Yeah.
And I had kind of assumed that because maybe you're looking under a log and it was a damp spot and the worms were attracted to that dampness and it would have nothing to do with like herding behavior. It's just they're all going after the same resource or same soil conditions. That would have always been my assumption. But they wanted to test that out, right? So you got a hypothesis, you got to test it out. So what she and her colleagues did is they built a box with 2 arms and they filled the whole thing with dirt and they placed worms into the central chamber. And then they waited 24 hours and came back just to see where were the worms. Had they gone anywhere? And when they did this, the first time they found out that all of the worms had collectively moved together into the same arm of the box. Now, could that be a coincidence? Absolutely. And replication is key in science. So the researchers repeated this experiment 30 times.
Whoa.
And each time they found all of the worms ended up in the same arm of the box with each other. The worms were somehow forming a herd and moving together.
That's
which
wild.
is super cool.
Did they
And
use
this is the first
different
time any
worms?
scientist it was one particular species of earthworm.
Well, I mean, like
and this
different
was
specimens of the same worm.
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know if it was just the same group of worms over and over, or if they were swapping in other worms to experiment, like, from the same species. I actually don't know that information, but it's a really good question.
Cool.
And it would be another, if they didn't, there's another variable you can test out. But this was the first time any scientist had ever demonstrated herding behavior in a worm or an annelid.
That's so
There's a
cool.
few hypotheses as to about how the worms were keeping together, such as following trails, like slime trails, literally, or like emitting pheromones. But in the end, the researchers think they do it completely by touch, which is also pretty unique in the animal
Wild.
world, that animals are having to rely completely on touch to stay together in a herd. But, probably makes sense when you're living underground with no light or anything. As to why they had this behavior, there could be several reasons. There is safety in numbers, and you do see animals gather together with that idea in mind. So like, hey, if we do get found, only one of us will get eaten, and it's better to have other targets near you if you're going to be discovered. So that's a real thing in nature. But that's not what the researchers think is happening here, though. The particular worm they were studying secretes an antibacterial fluid into the soil. And by hanging out together, that particular patch of soil ends up with a lot of the secretions in it, and thus that soil is safer to live in. So they're basically putting up like a collective defense and making the area safer to be in. There's actually lots of different species of worms that do secrete fluids like this. So it's possible that there could be other worm species that also herd together to take advantage of the collective protection. Like, we don't know because we haven't studied all these other worm species. This was the first group to do this. So as usual in new areas of science, more studies are needed.
Beautiful.
So that's what I have for you this week. Herds of worms.
That's wild.
You're welcome. By the way, the journal article describing this was in Ethnology, the International Journal of Behavioral Biology. It was called "A New Case of Consensual Decision, Collective Movement in Earthworms." This isn't breaking science news. The journal article came out back in 2010, but it's something that I still think hasn't really been studied all that much. So
No, that's
super
amazing.
cool.
Yeah.
That is really
Herding
cool.
worms.
Thanks, Kirk.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, we're going to take a break, and Rachel, it's your turn to amaze us after the break. See y'all soon. Strange by Nature podcast is brought to you by listeners like you who have joined the Society of Strange, our membership group on over at patreon.com/strangebynature. Society of Strange members can join at one of 3 different membership levels and help support the show, and also get some fun stuff like water bottle stickers or access to super secret content. So a thank you to those who have joined already to help make this podcast possible. If you haven't joined yet, we'll see you soon over at the Society of Strange at patreon.com/strangebynature. See you soon.
I'm taking a note from your book, Kirk, actually. And this week,
All right.
I'm talking about a bird.
Oh,
Oh my God.
treading into Kirk's territory here.
I know.
You already stole poisonous birds off my list. So what are you taking today?
I did. Woohoo. So this bird has a really rich cultural history and has a really strong meaning to the Nahuatl people. So that is a variety of groups of people in Central America, including like the Aztecs. And it's actually the national bird of Guatemala. And as it's generally only found in like Central America, but especially in Guatemala. But it actually can also be found in some Mexican states and even in some spaces in the southernmost United States, like in Arizona and New Mexico. This is
Yeah. All right. I'm in.
Yeah. So this is actually considered sacred by several different Mesoamerican cultures, to the point where it was actually a crime to kill this bird. Today, I'm talking about a trogon bird, which the male has bright iridescent green wing coverts, back, chest, sometimes its head, has a bright red belly and like lower belly and lower breast, with black interior wings. So today I'm talking about the quetzal.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah. That's what I thought you were going for.
Super cool.
Oh yeah. So this is an amazing, just like last week with the liquid rainbow. This is an amazing bird due to its coloring, but also the males on top of this coloring. Like when I said like bright iridescent green, I mean iridescent green. It looks almost metallic-y green, which is
it's not even.
Very.
it's
Right.
so bright.
It's burn your eyeballs iridescent. It's
Which is wild. But the males will also grow 2 long tail feathers, and these tail feathers reach up to 3 feet in length.
Oh my gosh.
Love it.
And it's just
Love
2
it.
feathers.
Wow.
Now that's part of that is just part of how they demonstrate how pretty they are to the females, which do actually look very similar. They're just not as brightly colored as the males, and their tails aren't as long as the males.
Mm-hmm.
But partially because those 2 tail feathers get so long, the quetzal is a terrible flyer. It's the worst flyer. And it also can't really walk very well either. It hops from branch to branch in the trees. And in addition, its feet are actually like osprey feet. It has 2 talons that face backwards and 2 talons that face forward, which help it perch really high
like
up
a
in
woodpecker.
the trees. Like a woodpecker or an osprey. Yeah. But what blows my mind is this is an insanely bright bird. So iridescent, so metallic. And even though they're so brightly colored, they're so hard to find. We actually struggle to get population numbers because they're so hard to find and hard to spot. So this actually is excellent camouflage for these birds. Generally speaking, they live in cloud forests, which is a place where in a dense tropical forest where there's a lot of moisture in the air, and it ends with like a fog. So it looks like the forest is actually in a cloud, hence cloud forest, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
On top of all of this, they have this long tail. They're cavity nesters.
Uh-huh.
That's insane.
Wow.
That can't be good.
Well, so they have a really tough beak. They'll either create a hole in a tree themselves with their pretty tough beak. It reminded me a lot of like a parrot beak. They generally eat fruit, especially fruit that is laurel based and similar to like avocados, but not avocados. They also eat insects, lizards, and frogs if they need to. But they'll use their beak and make a hole in the tree, or they'll steal an old woodpecker cavity and they'll hang out there. But this is just a really funny visual. I did see pictures of this. Because their tails are so long, both the male and the female will sit on the eggs. So when they go and they sit in the cavity, the tail feathers will stick out of the hole.
Stick out the hole. Amazing.
While they incubate the eggs for 2 weeks. Oh,
I'm surprised
Rachel,
they
I have a
don't
question
snap
for you.
off.
right?
You're saying quetzal, like there's like 6 different species of quetzals. So are you mostly talking about the resplendent quetzal?
That is a good
which is
point.
I think that's the one with like the longest tail.
Yes, I'm mostly talking about the resplendent quetzal. You're right.
Okay.
Most of the other ones
Because those
were very
are the ones that aren't going to
similar.
make it all the way up into Arizona.
No. Most resplendent quetzals do live in Guatemala and Costa Rica. There, like you
Right.
said, there are 6 different species, so there are a number of others that can make it up to very southern Arizona, New Mexico, but there's very localized populations of those. Yeah, but in general, I was talking about the resplendent quetzal,
Which is a fabulous name, by the way.
right?
Yes, it
Like
totally
if you're gonna talk
is.
about a beautiful and the very colorful bird. Why not give it the name resplendent? I wish
Right.
we
That's
should
what I say.
use
And
that
up
word
next, we
more.
have the resplendent Victoria.
Oh, amazing.
Well, thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you. I'll go by
Right?
that always now.
Oh, as you should.
That's your new title on the show, right? Although I feel like it was Rachel's topic. We should probably say the resplendent Rachel. That's got the
Ooh, it's
alliteration going on,
alliteration.
so
Yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna use
I'm afraid
that
we may
in
have
my
to
next
take
like
away your
icebreaker.
resplendent title now.
I'm gonna use that as like my next icebreaker when you have to come up with a alliteration with your name. I'm gonna say resplendent.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
It'll be amazing.
Now, if you want to pick some of the other ones for your title, Victoria, there's eared, which is not real complimentary. Crested, golden-headed, white,
Not a
white-
blonde.
yeah, white-tipped,
Oh.
or
Oh, I could go with that.
the other one was is it Pavonine or Pavonine? I don't know the last one. So it's nothing's as good as resplendent. That's
Yeah. Kind
Magnificent,
of went
perhaps.
downhill after resplendent.
yeah. The next one is eared. It doesn't no
No.
one wants to call it eared. We all have ears, but you know. And I'm glad you do because you're listening to Strange by Nature podcast.
You're right. That was what my topic was today. It's a little shorter one, but it's a lot
Oh,
of
good
fun.
because we took you way off topic there.
Nope, that was what I wanted to talk about. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the resplendent quetzal. It's a beautiful bird, and it has a lot of really significant cultural history and significance within Central America, especially. But it's also just beautiful. I wanted to talk about it, and its silly feathers sticking out
All
of
those
its
colors are
cavity
beautiful.
nest.
Thank you.
So we're going to take a quick break, and when we return, it'll be Vivacious Victoria.
There it is.
There we go. Hey, we're back. So, if you remember a few weeks ago, I did an update roundup of
Yeah.
Yeah. That was fun.
new information about some old topics. Well, a few weeks ago,
You
Kirk
doing it
and
again?
I went back and forth about an update we had both discovered. And I said it was for a topic that I had done, and I was like, well, I think I'm going to do it. But then I didn't have any other updates to add to it, and it wasn't enough for its own episode. But now I do have some more updates. So we're doing another update roundup.
Ooh, yes.
Awesome. Yeah, we both saw this news story, and I was
Yeah.
like, I think I hinted that I was gonna do something, and you were like, I think that's the same one I saw.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh.
We normally don't talk at all about what we're going to
No.
do for the show, but
Mhm.
in this case, Kirk was remembering that probably I had done something about this topic before. So,
Right. I was like, did you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
all right.
I'll defer to you on this one. I'm so excited. I've already forgotten the update. So go ahead.
I'm saving
I'm
it for the
so
end.
excited.
Okay.
Back in episodes 63 and 64, I talked about two interrelated things. Saturn's rings and one of its moons, Enceladus. And I now have I have a pair of updates related to those topics. So that's, it worked out nicely.
Ooh.
Amazing.
And then, as I mentioned, I'll have another update at the end. So if you remember, Enceladus is Saturn's sixth largest moon, and it's remarkable for a few reasons. One, it's the brightest object in the solar system in terms of how much light it reflects. Its albedo is like 81%,
Oh,
which
so
is very
cool.
high.
Mm-hmm.
And that is because, two, it is covered in a frozen water ocean, which is liquid under the surface. And
Cool.
three, it has geysers near its south pole that spew water out into space.
That's so
Yeah.
cool.
And it's the main source of ice. Yeah, main source
That-
of ice particles for one of Saturn's rings. Sorry,
Yeah, that
what?
sounds
Is
right.
is it cryovolcanism? Is that the term?
I think so, yeah. So, because of its water ocean and the fact that there is liquid water there, Enceladus has been the focus of a lot of interest as a possible location for extraterrestrial life. And today's update
Yeah.
makes that more possible that it might be the case.
Dun dun dun.
So, as I talked
they
about,
find?
yes, Dun-dun-dun. As I talked about, most of the data we have about Enceladus and Saturn's rings comes from the Cassini spacecraft mission, which orbited Saturn between 2004 and 2017.
Cassini was awesome.
Yes. And they're still analyzing data from Cassini. Not everything has been analyzed and understood yet. And previously, astronomers had determined that Enceladus's oceans contained a mix of a whole bunch of different compounds, including carbon dioxide, ammonia, methane, some other hydrocarbons. And in fact, of the 6 elements that exobiologists consider necessary for life, Enceladus was known to have 5 of them. It has carbon,
Not too
oxygen,
shabby.
hydrogen, nitrogen, and sulfur.
Ah!
Well, recent further
Which one was missing?
analysis. Well, I'll get there. Recent further analysis of Cassini data has revealed that Enceladus's oceans are also plentiful in the 6th element, which is phosphorus. It is the only ocean
Awesome.
yet discovered
so
outside
cool.
of Earth that has
I had seen the headline on that. I
Yeah.
hadn't read the story yet.
all 6 elements necessary for life to exist. So to dig in a little deeper, apparently Enceladus's oceans is full of sodium bicarbonate. That is baking soda to you. And that compound allows the phosphorus that
That's
may
so
be
weird.
present in the rocks to become chemically available in the water. So there's a lot of phosphorus, apparently. There's lots of carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen.
Sure. Okay.
The amount of sulfur available is still unclear, although apparently there is some. So, it's potentially possible that life could exist there. We don't know if it does or not.
Cool.
Exobiologists think that if it does exist, it would probably be most similar to the types of bacteria that exist near hydrothermal vents on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Which
Still so cool.
another topic I've discussed on the show. Yeah.
Another topic we did on the show.
Oh.
Yeah.
So my main source for that was from The Atlantic. There was an article about that. And so moving on to the next topic, Saturn's rings. I talked in the previous episode about how there's controversy about how and when the rings formed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, are they as old as the planet? Are they much younger? Well, there's some more recent evidence to suggest that Saturn's rings are no older than 400 million years.
So cool.
Which sounds like a long time, but in terms of space,
astronomical,
is
that's
very short.
That's like
And
baby.
I think
Yeah.
there were some like error bars on that too, right? They were saying maybe as young as like 100 million.
Yeah.
That I saw.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Which
And
is
yeah.
wild.
Yeah. This
Insane.
analysis was based on so the amount of dust and rocks, specifically they call them micrometeoroids that show up in Saturn's rings. These are considered quote unquote contamination in the ice that forms the main rings.
Mhm.
And most of the contaminants in the rings come from, Enceladus. But some of it also comes from outer space. And the stuff coming from Enceladus is moving pretty slowly, and the stuff coming from outer space is moving pretty quickly. And Cassini, when it was in the rings, collected and recorded space dust as part of its mission, including the velocity of the dust.
Oh, cool.
So they were able to
Amazing.
build a model based on the velocities, how much of it came from Enceladus, how much of it came from outer space. And this could give them a rate of contamination. And then they were
mind-blowing.
Yeah. And then they were able to compare the rate with the actual level of contamination in Saturn's rings. And so that is where they got the range of 100 to 400 million years
That's so
for
cool.
the age of the rings.
I think for context for listeners,
Yes.
Wow. So
dinosaurs were
it's a
on the
combination-
planet. Just for context for listeners.
Yeah, no. That would mean like during the Jurassic period, basically there were no rings around Saturn, possibly.
And the little dinosaur telescopes, they couldn't see any.
Well, they
Rings.
couldn't see them. Yeah. So I know that the rings are saying is mostly just ice from Enceladus spewing out, and then plus some extra junk that's just kind of
Right.
scooped up as it's moving along.
This doesn't tell us anything about the
Amazing.
other mystery, which is why the rings are there.
Yeah.
But as I also think I mentioned in the previous episode, the material in the rings is being pulled into the planet at such a rate that they will probably disappear in another 100 million years. So it's just a blink of an eye, really.
See them while you can.
Yeah.
See them while
Wild.
you can.
That's so cool.
They are a
Just
blip
wild.
in history, just like doorknobs.
Yes. Well, to bring things a little
You're
more
right.
down to earth,
Think about that one.
I'm thinking about it.
I have an update on death cap mushrooms.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's what the update was.
Oh no.
This one's really cool.
Yeah, Amanita phalloides.
No, it's a good one.
That was episode 41.
Ooh,
Death caps
wild.
are insidious and deadly mushrooms.
Mm-hmm.
And they resemble some edible species that are found in Asia. And you don't start to get symptoms typically until a couple days after you eat one, by which point they've basically destroyed your liver.
Uh-huh.
And the death rate is 10 to 30%, even with modern medical care. So not so great.
No, not so much.
Just to remind you, they have a toxin, which is called amatoxin, and it's actually a group of related compounds.
Mm-hmm.
And, as I discussed in that episode, evolutionarily, the mushroom doesn't seem to be getting anything out of being so deadly because the poison is delayed. So it's not like
Right.
it's deterring
Preventing
animals
it
from
from
eating it, because by the time you get sick, you don't remember that you ate it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So it's probably just these are compounds that the death cap uses for its own metabolism and just unluckily happen to be very deadly for us.
Sure.
So
Mm-hmm.
alpha amanitin, which is probably the deadliest of this group of toxins, and is also found in other Amanita species and some other poisonous mushrooms, including the destroying angel and the deadly skullcap.
An amazing name.
I just wanted to say those names.
Wonderful names.
They're great.
Mushroom people, okay. Mycologists give the best names to mushrooms. I'm saying it right now. That's amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to be known as resplendent or destroying? Those are your choices.
Destroying angel. Whew. Well, we don't know a lot about how alpha amanitin works in the body, but we do know that somehow it messes up cells' ability to make messenger RNA, which is crucial for making proteins, which is basically what all your cells are entirely made of, and therefore your body. So, some researchers at Sun Yat-sen University in China have done some really remarkable work, which may have revealed a possible antidote for alpha amanitin. This is a multi-part experiment, and it's really what they did was pretty incredible. They took human cell culture, so like cells in petri dishes, but they're human cells, and they used CRISPR gene editing technology to disable thousands of individual genes, but a different gene in each group of cells. So like one petri dish would have cells with gene A disabled. The next petri dish would have cells with gene B disabled for thousands of cells. They exposed all of the cells to this compound, alpha amanitin. And if any dish of cells did better than any of the others, like survived better, they then were able to figure out that particular gene must be involved somehow with how alpha amanitin works in the cell.
Interesting.
If that gene was disabled and it survived, that gene must be involved in how alpha amanitin, when it's working, how it's processed. So they did discover such a gene. It's called STT3B. Great name.
Yeah, great name.
Yeah. I think the mycologists win over the geneticists on the naming front. I mean, to be fair, there are a lot of genes to name.
There's a lot of genes, so and you want to have some sort of system.
Yes. So that was the first step. Then they made a computer model to figure out which existing drug compounds might work to disable this particular gene. And they came up with 34 possible drugs to try. Next step, they tested them on human cells. regular cells without the genes knocked out.
This is some wild array testing they're doing.
Yeah.
And so they tested these 34 different drugs and on cells that had been exposed to alpha amanitin, and all of them failed except for one, which is a dye called indocyanin green. It's a contrast dye that's used to take images of heart and liver function.
That's what blew my mind about this story, is that it wasn't some like wonder drug thing. They're like, oh, this is this dirt cheap common dye that we just already knew about and used for some unrelated thing.
Yeah, that's wild.
Totally. Okay, next step of the experiment. Then they took some mice, they poisoned them with alpha amanitin and gave them indocyanin green. And those mice that got this drug survived better with less liver damage.
Very cool.
Yeah, so it's really
surprising.
amazing. No work has been done in people yet, so we don't know if it helps. They think that
It's
based on
pretty tough to test in humans, let's be honest.
well,
Here, have this mushroom.
they think that this gene somehow lets the toxin enter the cells, and without the gene working, it has a harder time getting in. They think that's kind of what's going on with it. And then this drug targets the gene function. But we don't, as I said, we don't know if it works in people. Also, unfortunately, it works really only if it's given in the first few hours after ingestion. And a lot of times people don't know that they've eaten a death cap until they've been...
Because you knew you ate mushrooms, but you thought it was a different one. So you'd have no reason to go and,
where it might
and get this.
be coming in handy is
Unless you could mix the food ingredient into your dish automatically with your mushrooms.
green mushrooms. But if you have like a child who
eats something out of the yard.
Eats something out of the yard, is like, Mom, I ate a mushroom, and you're like, oh God, what did you eat? Then that's the kind of situation where potentially it could help if it should turn out to work in people. Yeah. So that's those are my 3 updates.
Amazing.
Now, those are 3 big updates. That's really cool.
Yeah. I was excited when I saw those things about Saturn, because then I was like, yes, what I need. So that's what we have for you this week. It's been awesome being with you guys and talking to you listeners. All right, we'll see you next time.
All right, we'll see everybody next time. Have a good night.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. Night.
Thanks, everyone, for listening to today's show. Be sure to subscribe. New episodes drop every Wednesday, and we love sharing this strange world with all of our listeners. If you would be so kind as to leave us a 5-star review, that would be great. It lets other lovers of the strange discover the show. You can reach out to us on social media by searching for Strange by Nature Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can send us an email as well. Our address is contact@strangebynaturepodcast.com. If you want more information about the show, you can also check out our website, which is strangebynaturepodcast.com. Until next week, get outside, stay curious, and embrace the strange.